Venue managers, venue owners, and sales team, have you ever been sitting in a presentation, listening to a podcast, or really any other kind of wedding industry specific education and thought, yeah, but we're different? Listen, I've heard you, and today's episode is just for you. My guest, Shannon Tarrant from Venue Help Desk, is sharing so many nuggets specific to wedding venues that are going to help you to find your ideal customers and get them in the door and sell them into your dream space. But listen, if you're any other kind of pro, trust me, do not tune out because Shannon works with so many pros across the country. And it's really interesting to me as a planner to listen to her and what she's telling us that venues have to do differently because I can help as a planner. I can also learn things as a planner as to how I can support our venues in our market. And there's so many strategies that she's using for venues that I am going to try and implement into my planning business as well. So do not miss this episode. I promise you're going to want to be fully engaged. Hey there, CEOs. This is the Wedding Pro CEO podcast, and I'm your host, Brandee. I'm a wedding pro just like you who's built one of the largest planning firms in Orlando, Florida. But it wasn't that long ago when that success came with long days, sleepless nights, and little to no pay. Fast forward to today, and I have the business that I've always dreamed of. A killer team, steady profit, and weekends with my family. Over the past 3 years, I've taught more than 1,000 wedding pros to do the same. My mission is to create a movement of wedding pros who are building a profitable wedding business that they've always dreamed of. Shannon, I am so excited to finally have you on the podcast and to be talking all things venue today because the work you've done with Wedding Venue Map, which I do want you to tell people about, and just how passionate you are for venues specifically, education in general. But it's like when you're talking to a venue or about venues, I feel like you just light up and you can hear all the passion in your voice. So I'm really excited for you to show some love and give some really fun nuggets to our venues today. Before we get too far into it though, can you tell us a little bit about really how you got into the industry so people know, like, yeah, she's legit. And then I also want to hear about Wedding Venue Map and Wedding Help Desk. So start wherever, but I want to get to there.
Yeah, so I've been in the industry just under 20 years, which I'm not sure how that happened. All of a sudden you blink and it's been quite a bit of time, but
Yeah.
I started my career in offsite catering and then went catering to venue and venue management for a family-owned hotel and resort, and combined spent about 10 years, which was really allowed me to refine sales processes and marketing processes. And, I really love the venue side because you were selling space versus selling maybe, a food product, which is more of a product, like you're selling a building and a
Yeah.
vision of the whole day on that side of the world. And so about 10 years in, I just, like, long story short, we're all wedding people. I just got sick of brides. Like, I feel like the industry, this makes me sound really old, but digital marketing blew up, right? Like all of a sudden Pinterest and websites and Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
And it was almost like information overload for the couples planning their wedding. And they lost a lot of trust in us as professionals and experts. And as the venue, it's literally the first thing. So they know nothing at all
Yes.
about where to start. And so I just lost the patience for it. And at that point, left to just really work with a lot of the venues in our market, coaching, consulting, and doing those things, and found this great little niche where we didn't have a great venue search engine. Brandee and I are both in the Central Florida area. You already know that listening to her, but there wasn't a way for people to find all of the venues that existed because some of the national platforms started removing venues that weren't paying. So we built a company called Wedding Venue Map. And that's a Central Florida resource for couples searching to find a venue where they can really get really deep on 40 different criteria to sort the list to find specifically what they're looking for. And so I've been doing Wedding Venue Map for 7 years this year. We're having our
Wow.
7-year itch. How did that happen?
That feels crazy. It
But
feels like you just started Wedding
oh
Venue
my
Map.
God, I know. But it's been so fun because I get to live
Yeah.
in a space in my regular full-time world in between the couples planning their wedding where we're a free resource. So they'll use terminology and share frustrations and experiences with us. and being able to take that information and bring it back to the businesses that really, need to know out of the mouths of the couples what they're saying. So it's cool to kind of get to live the dichotomy in between the two.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And obviously I've known you forever, so I've seen a lot of your journey, but what I think is interesting about where you come from with the education is that you did live that life of selling a venue with multiple
Mhm.
spaces, right? And really took it so far. Like you grew that company so much, that space so much. But now you work with tons of venues. So you get to see all the good, bad, and ugly, different kinds of spaces, different kinds of venues. And I think that that brings a really unique perspective because honestly, a lot of publications will say how can I say this without putting my foot in my mouth? If you've never been in it as
Yeah.
also the person responsible for the sales, I do think that adds a layer of education that you have to have. Like it's important to have that layer of education of like the sales weigh on you. But
Mhm.
also I love that you have gotten to see so many different venues and how they work. So I feel like you have a really unique perspective in the industry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I love, we have 500 venues in the Central Florida market, and I'm
Crazy.
having conversations with them literally all day, every day, to really understand and see what's trending and, what the challenges are and how much of them overlap versus maybe something that's specific to one type of venue.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, while I don't live in the venue sales space still today, which
Right.
my partners on Venue Help Desk do, they're still running a venue over in Texas. It just, I still get that same level of interaction with the engaged couples, but from a totally different perspective. And so being able to take that knowledge and the successes that we've found and the staying forward on all
Mm-hmm.
those conversations we're having with the couples. Last year, we launched a new brand called Venue Help Desk that we're
Okay.
building to really support the venues across the country, checking the box of solving one problem at a time. It
Mm-hmm.
gets very overwhelming, as a venue. Sometimes you're struggling with sales or you need more leads or you're not closing contracts. And so we're building out resources and helpers and support systems that are really specific to kind of solving today's problem, and then we can work on tomorrow's problem next.
Yeah. I love that because honestly, I'm a planner. We all know this, I
Hmm.
think. But I managed a venue here in town for years, as you know, and I definitely had a little bit of shock and awe at how different it was to run a venue
Yeah.
because there are a lot of differences, but one that I think is the overarching that I talk about with my students all the time is yes, it stinks when us Blush, the planner, is not booked on a Saturday. Hey there, CEO. If you're loving this video and you want to know more about how I help wedding pros 2 and 3 times their revenue in less than a year, I want to invite you to my completely free training. We've got the link for you in the description below. Now, I'm going to walk you through my exact strategy to book over 5 figures every single month in my business. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on this free training. It will completely transform your business. But when a venue isn't booked, like it's very difficult. Like you still have lights to keep on, you still have air conditioning to run, you still have water, you still have staff, and that's super challenging. It's like every day that that venue sits empty is costing you money versus like we just aren't making the revenue, right? So I think to me, I felt like that was a really big difference between service providers and a space, a venue. What's your thought on that?
I mean, I 100% agree. I think sometimes as an industry, we forget the kind of overhead that goes into a venue itself.
Yeah.
A silly little story, but when I worked at the resort, I mean, we had hit like $4 million in sales one year in weddings. And I went into my boss's office, cocky as can be, and was like, I'm not making enough money.
Yeah.
Did you see what my numbers were last year? Like, I need to make more. And he's like, let's go for a ride. And he puts me in a golf cart and drives me into the middle of the golf course and is like, isn't it pretty here? And I'm like, is this where we're going to negotiate? Like, what's happening? And he said, isn't the golf course beautiful? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, $1 million a year it costs to keep this grass green. And
Wow.
he's like, this seed, the water, the this,
Yeah.
the staff, the mowers, the equipment, the whatever. And he's like, your weddings support this grass being green. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be super satisfied with what I get paid now. Like, I think it's that perspective
Yeah.
that you don't always see when you're showing up at a venue, how much, if it's an outdoor venue and the landscaping is beautiful, and what, like, the costs that go into a venue and
Mhm.
mortgages and things that sometimes the service providers don't always see, and so there is more pressure. I look at venue dates and space and time like hotel room beds,
Mhm.
that like if that you do not sell that bed that day,
It's
you'll
done.
never get the revenue back. It's
That's
gone
it.
forever.
Yep.
And so whereas sometimes, when a service provider, if they don't sell a weekend, they're like, oh god, look at this, I get Saturday off. And I'm like, venue owners are not looking at it from that
Nope.
perspective.
Nope, they're not. It was so, and I wasn't even the owner of the venue. Those sales
Yeah.
did lie on me and my team. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was so stressful. It was so
Yeah, the
stressful.
pressure of that overhead is totally different.
Yes, it is different. And I think there's so much about being a venue owner that's slightly different than the service providers. But one thing I want to touch on and kind of go back to what you just said was you were saying you kind of got burnt out in the industry because couples come to a venue, they're the least educated they typically are in the whole process, right?
Yeah.
So as a venue, you have this really big responsibility to educate them. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because honestly, when you said it, I wrote it down because I was like, I've never thought about that. That like you are literally the first venue or the first vendor that they're typically looking for.
Mhm.
And they're
Yeah, I
so
mean, every
uneducated about the
market's
process.
different, right?
Yeah.
Some markets, the majority hire a planner first, but I'd have to imagine, I mean, we do about 20,000 weddings a
Yeah.
year in Central Florida. When people ask me, I'm like, realistically, I think less than 5% hire a planner
Mhm.
before the venue. They may do
Agree.
it quick after the venue. That might be
Mhm.
another 30-40%, and I'm totally making up those statistics. But just educated guess, it's hard when they come in, and when people in my personal life would say, what do you do for a living? I'd say I'm a professional balloon popper, because couples would come in and say things like, well, we have 200 guests and $20,000 and whatever. And I'd be like, pop that balloon real
Not
quick. You got
happening.
not enough money, like
Yeah.
not. And so I think it's really, venues have to walk such a careful line. They want to sell the space, but figuring out how to service that the best, where if they really don't have the budget for what your venue is, buyers are liars. So there's always room sometimes to play around with it.
Yeah.
But it's so much more education of how much money and where that money should go, and learning what the couple's priorities are. But we were a super hands-on venue. I would say the
Yes.
more I've coached through the years, most venues are like, I'm going to let you rent my space for 10K, even though you have a $20,000 budget, and you can figure it out from there.
Yep.
And I think to get to the level where we were doing 150 weddings a year, it was a $4 million line of business. Like, to do that took a little bit of the elevated time and energy walking the couples through the process. And the venues
Mhm.
that put a little bit there through that, the way they tour and the conversations they have and the questions they ask, we
Yeah.
find those are the ones usually that are booked way more, because they're helping, not just selling.
That's so good. I think that that's so helpful. Do you feel like now with the age of digital technology, all the online space, do you feel like this is an area where venues can excel in doing some of that education on their platforms? Or do you feel like, no, that's really not necessarily their responsibility to do outbound?
I mean, I think in all of the wedding industry, I mean, I'll definitely die on this hill. I am a firm believer that everybody should have a general idea of what all the costs are, the whole pie when it comes into a wedding. If you're the
Mm.
DJ, you should know how much planners cost. If you're a planner, you should know how much the average cakes and desserts are. Like,
Yeah.
everyone should have enough of a working knowledge to be able to share that. But I think the venues that put the energy, maybe in terms of digital marketing from a place of like social media, Instagram, TikTok,
Mhm.
blogging, because that's what people are searching and Googling, that's the tips and advice and things that they're trying to do. I think the venues that put the energy there in terms of educating are actually qualifying leads better.
Yeah.
They might be getting leads that find them them because they were looking for more information. But that's also the type of content that couples share. So if I'm a bride who's already gotten married that follows your page and you just gave a really good tip, I might whip that reel through the DMs to a friend of mine who just got engaged, who's like, wait,
Yeah.
what's that venue? Social media is this like rabbit hole. And
Yeah.
so if you're looking for the kinds of content, I mean, real weddings are pretty, don't get me wrong, but when you help people, guide them through that process, you don't get to throw your hands up and be hands off anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. And I think one of the other things that I thought was really interesting that you said pre-show when we were chatting was that venues don't have quite the same referral stream as some of the other vendors. And I think we all know that, but I do think that that's something that is unique to venues. You mentioned, I don't know, 5% of weddings book a planner first. I would say that's fairly accurate. I mean, we
Okay.
definitely get a handful, 5 to
Yeah.
10%, right? A
Yep.
year that don't have a venue yet. So we have that luxury of being able to refer our partners,
Yeah.
our venue partners. But for the most part, venue, photographer, planner, like the three of us are booked first. And I would say venue is typically first. So
Yep.
how do you encourage venues to get in front of couples? Like what are some, besides listing on the Knot and Wedding Wire, like what are some ways that you would encourage venues to really dig into warm leads, I guess I should say?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's so many marketing channels in today's world. It can
Yeah.
get very overwhelming of do I have to do all the things? And so
Hmm.
for those who have no time but plenty of cash, throwing the money towards a national directory
Yeah.
is a great place to be because you will get quantity of leads.
Okay.
And that you've got leads you can work and consistently work through. But there's so many other digital marketing options. And I'm going to talk about a sleeper one also because I think one of the biggest things that venues forget is networking. Is
Yes.
that you've got, of course, social media ads and Google ads, I think are really great about driving warm leads because you
Hmm.
can guide them to specifically a landing page that isn't just all the information of your website that kind of gets them through to an offer to they've seen the ad, they like what it says, and they
Hmm.
take the next step. So I
Hmm.
think Google and social for people who are like, I don't want to do a directory is probably the next strongest place to spend their money. Of
Hmm.
course, organic social is great, but you and I both know they're not doing enough of the reels and the
No.
hashtagging right and things like that to get found there.
Yep.
They use social media more as a portfolio place, which is still better than nothing. I'll take it.
Yeah.
But
Post
if you're
something.
not going to lead gen with it, at least let it be a great portfolio. But
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest fails from a venue standpoint, especially for new venues,
Hmm.
this is the hard. If no one in the industry knows your venue exists, you have got to go out and start meeting the local pros because
Yes.
they'll talk about you, share, come tour, post about it. Like you can build relationships that I'm just saying, like, they might not be direct, they're going to be able to refer you that much,
Hmm.
but it's a knowledge base of conversations that are happening that you don't want them to say, oh, I've never heard of that place before.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's huge, right? And you're right. Just, the venues typically are getting booked first, but I think one of the things that made us successful in taking over the venue that we took over was because we leaned into those relationships that we already had, but we were
Hmm.
like, come out, please come out. Like, we'll buy you coffee, like, take a tour. But we were wanting to basically borrow the audience of
Yep.
our vendor partners in town because they were posting about the tours, they were doing style shoots, they were, doing fun carousels and things like that about this new venue in town. And that was allowing us to seem like we were being talked about so much. Like we were all the buzz.
Right. And even if you're so using that venue as an example,
Hmm.
even if that DJ starts posting about that venue, even
Yeah.
if his own booked clients are following them, they might already have a venue,
Yeah.
but then their friends get engaged or a family member gets engaged. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I saw that. And
Yes.
so when we live in the world of wedding influencers, right? Like, other businesses that are really strong on social media locally that have your ideal following
Hmm.
could be considered influencers. And I think venues really fail at tapping that resource. And the ones that come out and network and start building that, they find they just move the needle, the dimmer brightens real quick instead of it being like, okay, okay,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true. I see it, in our programs. I'm like, oh, mm, you have to be able to network in your local market. Like, I'll leave it there. But like, that is so important.
Yeah,
So I'm so glad that you said that. I want you to touch on a little bit too, Shannon. We talk so much about sales, the sales process
yeah,
in on this podcast. I do think that process is different for venues. Mainly, and you said this before the show, because it's very difficult to do a Zoom consult, right? So like I can hop on a consult in 15 minutes and be like, yeah, let's jump on Zoom, right? But it's not that simple for venues. So can you talk about maybe some of the ways that you feel like venues are different when it comes to the sales process?
yeah. I mean, when you look at the physicality, not everybody who owns a venue works at it full time.
Mm-hmm.
There's very many people who don't, from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday,
True.
sit at their venue and wait for someone to show up. And so that can be a challenge. Whereas, like,
Yeah.
I worked at a hotel, there was two of us there all day, every day, Monday through Friday. We had it covered.
Yeah.
But so I think that there's that functionality of time, that the expectation of the needle moving quickly when it comes to choosing a venue. We just finished our local couple survey, and they're touring anywhere from 5 to 8 venues. Was the data we
Wow.
got, is that they are physically
Wow.
going to 5 to 8 venues. So now think of the venue I worked at. We were
Yeah.
spoiled rotten. We had an automatic online booker. You could grab whatever date and time you wanted. We did have nighttime spots open. We had Saturday spots open. We didn't tour Sundays. We did Saturday mornings. You could come after hours at 6 o'clock. It
Yeah.
was easy to get in with us because we were full-time salespeople. But the average venue manager owner is the sales, the marketing, the ops, the all of the things. And
Yeah.
so for them to get a tour with us, we were the first tour like 80% of the time. But then I'm you can't hard close anymore. You can't be like, sign today, book today. Like, it doesn't work. They
Yeah.
freak out and run away, especially if they're Gen Z.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of look at the process has elongated, that you have to find better ways to pet and love them and stay in touch and check in, because they may love your venue, but they really have the FOMO of missing out of this venue that's, I mean, Brandee and I, the venues we worked at were
Mhm.
across the street, literally
Yeah.
across the street, because maybe they can't get into that venue. Maybe that venue doesn't tour Saturdays and they can't get in for 4 weeks. And so my sales lead time just got way elongated by someone else's timeline because of the physicality of driving to a location. So it's definitely a shift.
It is definitely a shift. That's interesting that you said that, because your sales time can get elongated because of other people. Because I never thought about that, Shannon. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But like, you could be on it, like you're full time, you've got tours coming all the
Yeah.
time, but they won't make a decision. Some couples won't make a decision until they've seen all 5 venues or however many they want to look
Yeah.
at, and it could be 4, 5, 6 weeks. So that leads me to a question. And you and I used to talk about this all the time, like, okay, what's the best way to sell a venue, like all the things. Uh, One of the questions you used to talk about asking is, what other venues are you touring? Do you feel like that's still a question that venues should be asking when they're doing their tour?
Yes, because I feel like you'll learn enough about who that
Mhm.
when you ask that question, I'll say, "Oh, what other venues have you already toured?" Because I want to know
Okay.
if I'm the first, the last, or in the middle.
Smart.
And almost always they were like, "Oh, you're the first." And I was like, "Perfect." That means they're coming to me clean and fresh. No
Okay.
bad information, no good information either. Like, I am that education process, we're at kindergarten right now. Like,
Okay.
we got to start from scratch. Whereas if I'm the eighth tour, they've already got gained knowledge along the way. And so I think that when you ask, what other tours are you planning, venues are you planning to go, schedule time to go look at, you will start to realize they'll overshare, but they'll say, "Oh, well, we want to go tour venue Y, but it's 3 weeks before we can get a tour in for them." Or we're trying to book a tour with venue X, but nobody's respond. Like, you
Ugh,
would get so much competitive knowledge by asking that one question. Or they say, "Oh yeah, well, my cousin's coming in town in 4 weeks, and then we're gonna tour that space." So I'm like, okay, good, 4 weeks. Like, I got it, the
yep.
chase is on.
Hmm.
So Yeah, asking those simple questions really give you so much ammunition as a salesperson by just gaining that and to start to learn about your competitors.
Yes, because do you feel like I already pretty much know your answer, but
Yeah.
I was still like, I want to know because it's been years since I've sold a venue
Yeah.
and you and I would chat. Do you feel like that is information you're using there in the tour as a close? So are you asking that question earlier? Or are you asking that question later and you're kind of just like, I'm going to use this in my follow ups a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's the very first question I ask. Like
Okay.
literally, like, how are you? Congrats on your engagement. How'd you get engaged? Where else are you looking?
Yeah,
Because it is so much information. Like, I never speak poorly about another venue.
of
Like,
course.
I'm never gonna say anything negative or anything like that. But the venue I was at, we had a strong competitor close by, but I was a hotel and they
Yep.
had nowhere to stay.
Yep.
And so I could very easily constantly be highlighting our benefits and our differentiators by saying, well, and your guests, they can come and stay, and it's a 3-day party, and nobody has to
Mm,
drink and drive down these windy, hilly roads out here in the country. And that other venue had windy, hilly roads. And everybody, I was like, here, everybody just stumbles up to their room. So I think it allows you to target the sales process
hmm.
totally differently when you have at least a little bit. It's the same thing as if you were going to ask them what are their colors
Yeah.
as a plant and they're blush and gold, right? Like if those are their colors, when you're saying like, check this out, think of this, you wouldn't be selling them and showing them purple flowers, right? Like it's
Yes.
the same knowledge and information that makes the sales process feel more personal and really kind of drive home what your unique selling, proposition is.
Yes, I hope that all of our listeners heard what Shannon just did there, which was speak directly to their pain points. And no matter what kind of a vendor you are, venue, DJ, florist, whatever you are, when you take the time to ask those questions as you're doing your tour, exactly what Shannon just said is like, you already know, okay, if they're looking at venue XYZ down the street, you know what the challenges with that venue are. So speak to that fact. Like Shannon said, don't speak negatively. Highlight the fact that you are
Yeah.
different, you are unique, right? I also think, and you're so good at this, I think you're very, very conversational, right? Like that's such a gift of yours is like ask questions, have fun. But I think that that's such an important piece for any vendor. And I'm not hating on our venues. I'm not. But I think venues, because you have a space to sell, often forget to ask some of those questions because you're like, I just want to tell them about our space. Like, here's
Oh
how
my
you could
God. I
set it.
call
And
them realtors. They
okay,
tour
tell us about this.
like realtors showing an
Yes.
open house. Like
Yes.
it's like when my realtor, I was buying a house, we'd open the door and she'd be like, feel free to look around. Let me know if you have questions. You
Right.
can have this here. You could put the couch there and whatever. And I was like, okay. Like, but it wasn't guiding the process. I mean, the amount of times I go on a venue like tour, I go and joke around and say I'll be the intern learning and I'll just kind of evaluate as we go. And
Yeah.
they'll say things like, well, you can put the DJ there. And I'll be like, well, you never asked if they wanted a band.
Right.
Like you
Yes.
assumed that out of 100 weddings we did a year at my hotel, only 2 did a band. But if
Hmm.
I keep saying the DJ, the DJ, the DJ, the DJ without learning that they were planning on a DJ,
Yep.
I have turned off that couple. They're like, oh, well, maybe I can't have a band here. I'm going to go look elsewhere because I didn't ask before I assumed.
The buffet, the sweetheart table, the all
Well,
the things, right?
yes.
Like, and to me, I think, and it goes back to actually your realtor point so well because you work from home and you don't have kids. So if your realtor's walking you through a house and they're like, oh, and this is where the nursery could go, and you're like,
Oh,
okay, I need a home office, like.
yes.
So
Yeah.
when you get to know your couple, you can paint their picture of their
Yes.
wedding in your space and how it can be used. And I think this is something that I would love to see venues really step their game up and
Yeah.
sell less the space and more the dream in the space.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. But it's like, I feel like you have to take the time to, the frustration as the venue, though, like we already hit on, is you're the first step.
yeah,
And
right.
so they'll walk in and be like, well, I don't know if I want a band or a DJ. And I'll say,
Right.
great, let me give you the 2-minute breakdown.
Yeah.
Like, if you are like, if budget is not a hesitation and the music and the energy of live musicians is something that you thrive in your personal life, you're a concert goer, you're a whatever, then, and you've got the space in the budget, because a band is usually 5 times the cost of a DJ.
Yep.
If you are like, I have to, and then they're always like, no, I don't need that. But the amount of them that would be like, yeah, I love concerts. I love the way the drums make, and I'm like, you should think about fitting a band into the budget.
Yeah.
And now I can kind of guide space wise where that option would be or the other option, but they don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
And if you want to book your venue more, or any category who's listening today, you want to book your services more, you have to learn, not just say, I mean, the amount of times that people are like, well, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And I'm like, that's great, but you're making me, the bride, feel like, I'm just one other wedding you have this year, and it's not anything about what I want it to. Of course, we're going to guide them to what we want them to do. They're going to do what we want them to do, but we've got to like paint the picture that, I'm an expert. I know what I'm talking about. You do have options and choices. And then down the road, we can guide things in different directions.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Shannon, I love this so much. And I hope that our venues that are listening have really gotten just hey, here's a fresh perspective on how you can tour, how you can sell yourself, how you can network, because you are so unique. Our venues are so unique. But the similarity is get in it with the couples. Like, be excited, ask questions, sell to their pain points, sell your unique selling proposition. That is the same across any vendor that you are. Is there any last thing that you would want to say to a venue owner that's listening to this that's just like, don't close this episode before we tell venues this?
Yeah, I mean, I think my like secret tip, and we've tested it now a few times and it's working really well, is creating FOMO at the end of that appointment time, right? This couple's invested time, they've driven to your venue, spent time with you, and the hard close doesn't work as good as it used to when I first started in the industry. Didn't even work by the time I left the venue 10 years ago. Like, the hard close was off the table, but we live in a world of like the fear of missing out on something great. And so whether you create a 2-week special, a 7-day special, a 3 days a little tight, but somewhere between a 7, 10, 2-week bonus that they get for signing the contract and paying the deposit within that window of time, have it be, I don't believe in discounts. I'll die on the hill of it. I'm never discount your packages, but something that is an extra, doesn't cost you anything, an added bonus, an extra 2 hours of, but something they want. It's got to be what they want. Like, it's sexy, right? It's something that they all want but don't want to pay for. But create something that creates that fear of, I'm not going to get, or I'm going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So I have tested this so many times now, and it is moving the needle quickly that they're either calling those other venues and trying to shove a tour in and be like, well, if I don't get this tour in within the next 2 weeks, I'm going to go with that venue. That other venue will move. They will either make time for them, but if they really liked your space and you hit their budget and you hit their pain points, we're finding the couples making decisions in a shorter window of time by creating FOMO. I'm 43, so I don't really live in the world of FOMO. I'm not that girl. I don't see, like, I'll see Brandee's conference over on Instagram and everybody attending, and I'm so excited to watch along, but I'm not at home feeling like, I wish I was there. Like, I'm not that girl, but I'm excited to see it, and it's cool to follow along. But FOMO doesn't make me move on many things in life, but anybody getting married in today's world under the age of 35, FOMO is the name of the game.
We use it at Blush all the time. I'm like, okay, we have a week left until the end of the month. So what do we need to do? Like, get these people off the fence. One of the things that you said, I just want to make sure our listeners hear this, is what you don't want to do is just like make a blanket special, if you sign by, 2 weeks from now, whatever. If you're asking the questions during the tour, you should be able to know, okay, I'm going to provide some sort of a signing bonus. At the end of this, I need to listen for what they want. So if they're like, gosh, we really wanted to get ready on site, but it's expensive to add the hours or whatever. Okay, we'll throw in 2 additional hours of getting ready or whatever, or we set up time or whatever it is. We'll throw in brunch in your bridal suite. I love that option of making it custom to them so that it's a hell yes. Like, yes, of course. I
Yeah.
would be stupid to say no, right?
We had an internal pre-approved list
Yep.
so that like these were all the things that we could. I mean, some of it was so simple as like, oh, we'll
Yes.
take care of the sparkler exit. We had gold and silver acrylic chargers.
Yeah.
Like they cost us $1 each. And we ordered
Yeah.
them from China. They were $1 each. They did the job. Like,
Yeah.
but we had this list of things that as we were having I was a hotel, so they got 2 nights in the honeymoon suite, and I'd be like, and they'd be like, oh, my parents are flying in. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
we'll include 1 night for each of your parents if it was our slow season. Like,
Perfect.
whatever the parents are paying, oh, we're definitely going to make it a parent bonus. Like,
Yeah.
but I think you've got to have, if you have a team, you want to have an established list of here's kind of the go-to things that you can
Yeah.
do based upon that conversation. But yeah, it wasn't here's the 2-week special that everybody gets, because that doesn't work. I've tried that 1,000 times. Here's the special for the month. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
No, it
It's
doesn't
got
work.
to be something that's particular to their needs. And it's one of the easiest ways to overcome today's long booking season that used to be less than 30 days. They'd make decisions in like a day
Yeah.
and sign the contract and move on. And it's just not across the board. It's not happening. And remember,
No.
if you're a vendor listening to this, if the venue isn't getting them booked in 30, 60, 90
Yeah.
days, they haven't moved on to anything else.
Yeah, because they don't know what their date is. They don't know what their venue is. 100% right. Shannon, this is so good. I know our listeners, whether you're a venue or not, that you have gained so much from this. I love this episode. So, Shannon, where can everybody connect with you online?
Absolutely. So Venue Help Desk over on Instagram, Facebook. The website is Venue Help Desk. And we're so excited this year. If you're listening to this episode in 2024, but there will be plenty more to come on June 10th and 11th and mid-September-ish. We are hosting 2 in-person workshops that are heavily focused on, it's 2 days. The entire first day is getting your leads to book tours. And the second day is getting those tours pushed through with things like the 2-week special that I shared here, different ways for you to spend the time, invest the time in your business to solve the problems, but the workbooks and everything will be done and complete. So it's not really conference style where you gain a ton of knowledge that then you have to go back and do a lot of work. It's very like work as we go, so that by the time you head home, you will slay and solve all those problems. So, but Venue Help Desk is kind of where you can find me for anything coaching, helping, support related.
I love it. Shannon, thank you so much for being here today. It was awesome.
Thanks for having me. I love your podcast and I'm an all the time listener.
Thanks, girl. If this video was helpful, make sure to check out the link in the description below for more videos on how to build profit without working more.